Hi, Tracy. Welcome back to College Hood Advice. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about how to create a healthier relationship with digital media. You may remember Tracy from back a few months ago when we were talking about how to cope with COVID, and we talked about some healthy ways to manage our media overload. Today we're going to talk more generally about how to create a healthy relationship with digital media. And I want to start by defining digital media because that's kind of a
Mhm.
giant blob kind of term. So what is digital media in the context of this conversation?
So I'm going to get as broad as I can with this because I end up talking about all sorts of things when I talk about this stuff. So digital media is really anything that we consume on a device, um, and activities that happen where a large part happen on some device. And that device can be your phone or a computer or a tablet or laptop. So any of our devices that we use. And then media, I think it can be traditional media like movies or music or television, but also social media, games, any kind of platform that we go on that we're engaging, where most of the engagement is happening online in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And there are positive and negative might not be the best terminology. I think I'm going to shift it to what are some healthy attributes
Mhm.
that screens and devices provide us? And then we'll jump into maybe some less healthy
Yeah.
things that devices bring into our lives.
Yeah, and I love that you shifted that way because I've come in my own life and experience to really redefine how I think of technology and media and digital technology. Is it just is. It just is a part of our culture. It's a part of our life, and it's not good or bad. It just is. And where the healthy and unhealthy aspects come into play is how we engage with digital technology and digital media. So it's not the device themselves, and it's not typically the platforms, although I would say some platforms are not healthy and not great by definition, but it generally is how we engage with them and how we use them and our behaviors and patterns around our use that become either healthy behaviors that can really be fun and important, or things that can be concerning.
And what are some examples of what those kind of look like? How would I know if it's a healthy, fun thing versus something
Yeah.
that might be more concerning behavior?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of like psychological and physical impacts of using media. So it really should be fun or useful, right? And so if you're talking to friends, if you're sharing content on Instagram and you're having fun with it and it feels good and it's positive and you feel good both during the experience and after the experience, and those are healthy things. You can go online and learn a ton of things that you didn't know. You can learn about people and cultures you didn't know about. I mean, there's so many great
Mhm.
things about going online, and those of us that are in the working world and even to a certain degree in school, it really helps those experiences too. It can really enhance our experience in school and what we learn
Mhm.
and how we learn it, and it can help it work. So those are really healthy things to get out of it. The problem is if we're not engaging with our technology in healthy ways, then we can start experiencing some of those negative effects. And those things can be as simple as just kind of feeling down and bad after you're online for a period of time, to as extreme as feeling depressed or anxious. It can impact our sleep. It can impact our physical activity if we're just on our devices and kind of sitting in
Mhm.
the same position for hours on end. We've even seen in the medical field effects on our eyes, and people complaining of back pain and neck pain and problems. Orthopedics docs are starting to see problems with people's joints and wrists as they use their devices. And so it can have a
Wow.
whole host of negative impacts that we don't think about when we're using them, but that are certainly happening.
Yeah, one thing that I hear a lot from students who follow along with this show is feeling comparison, feeling
Mm-hmm.
bad from a place of comparison, feeling
Yeah.
like they're less than because other people's lives look more successful or more
Yeah.
perfect than theirs. So I think that walking away from scrolling through Instagram, and if you have that feeling, even feeling
Mm-hmm.
bad, that's
Yeah.
an indicator that maybe not an unhealthy way of consuming the media. Do you
Yeah.
see that?
Absolutely. And I think that, one thing to remember that I always try to get folks to keep in mind is, and we'll take, Instagram is a great example because it does this so beautifully. And it was started as a way to showcase photographs. And so
Mhm.
Instagram is a great snapshot of an intentionally chosen and curated aspect of someone's life. It's not their real life. It's not the real experience. It's not the entirety of even a moment that they're showcasing. It's just what they have decided that in a given moment they want to reflect about themselves. And often those are things that they want to highlight to show themselves in a positive way. I mean,
Mhm.
there's exceptions and there's people who definitely use it in a much more transparent kind of real way if they're connecting with the people they're engaging with differently. But a lot of people really do. And not that there's a big problem with wanting to show yourself in a positive way, but often it's inflated or it's an unfair perspective of what really a person might be experiencing. And so if you're viewing that and you're realizing, well, that's not how my life is,
Mhm.
I just got out of a bad breakup, or I've been exercising for like the last month and I can't seem to get to something that feels like a good healthy place for me, or I'm just hanging out in my apartment or my dorm on a Friday night and nobody's asking me to, and look at all my friends, they look like they had a good time. Why didn't anybody ask me to go? So
Mhm.
it can lead you to feel like you're missing out on stuff, or you're doing it wrong, or you haven't figured it out, or you're not as successful in living your life in the way that you're supposed to. But you're really not being fair to yourself because you're comparing yourself to a chosen snapshot in someone's time and then making a judgment that your life in its entirety should be reflected in how it compares to that. That is a losing game every time.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel better because I think sometimes too, if you're passively consuming it, you're not even aware of why you're feeling
Yeah,
bad always.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And, maybe a way we should think of when we're on social media is just to say, just to be thankful, like thankful for showing me this part of your life or this moment that's going well. I hope the rest of your life is going well too. You
Oh,
know,
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
if we can kind of acknowledge that and then just say it's like you went to your friends and they went to, Mexico for spring break and they showed you their pictures, and they're going through their phone and they're showing you all these shots. You fully know that that was a very specific point in time of their life. And now they're right back at school with you, kind of in the grind, doing all of the hard work. So it's not much different when you're going on social media and all these platforms and looking at what people are posting. It's a moment in time. It's hard not to
Mhm.
compare because we all have things that we want to change about our lives and that we wish could be different, and we don't always view what we put out meeting up to the expectations of what we see other people putting out, and certainly
Mhm.
going on some of these platforms really enhances that and makes that much bigger than it really is.
Mhm. So there's a lot of conversation about the amount of time you're on your
Hmm.
screens and that we should limit screen time. And so how
Yeah.
much screen time is too much screen time?
Yeah. It's so funny. When I was preparing to do this podcast, I actually went to see if I could figure out what kind of recommendations there were for adults and young adults around screen time, because we're just now in the world of like pediatric and child and adolescent healthcare starting to get a sense of what might be too much. But a
Mhm.
lot of that work really has been focused on developing brains, right? Because we want to know as brains grow and develop, what are we doing that can make that better or make that not go so well. I didn't find a whole lot for adults and young adults. I think that it probably isn't that different, honestly, from what we see in younger kids, especially adolescents, because I think that there's just a point where it's too much for our brains to health in a healthy way process and digest all of the input that comes from screens. In younger folks, we have, and this is, we'll kind of think about adolescents. We have found in some of the research surveys that have been done that somewhere around 2-ish hours and more seems to have more negative outcomes. And so people start experiencing more symptoms of feeling depressed or feeling anxious than folks who view it less. The healthiest people actually are those who do spend some time on their screens. So this is not a recommendation to say that we shouldn't use screens, and that screens, again, like you said in the beginning, it's not are they good or are they bad? It's about how we engage. It's not to say that screens are bad and technology is something that we shouldn't use, but there's probably a number there somewhere, when you start getting into 4, 5, and 6 hours, and especially continual use, right? And so using for, 30 minutes earlier in the day, and then you're on for another hour later, and then maybe an hour or so before you go to bed you're on another 30 minutes. It's much different than if you're sitting for a 3-hour stretch, and you're on your screen and you're consuming or receiving a lot of input into your brain.
Yeah. What are some warning signs that you're not having a healthy relationship, or that your screen use is sort of out of alignment with where it should be?
Yeah. The first thing I always tell people is, how do you feel? Like when you get off of using a screen for however long you've been on it, just kind of check in, not just with your emotional feelings, but kind of checking in with your body. Are you feeling tense? Are you feeling tight? Are you feeling, are you noticing that you're feeling agitated or upset or sad or just anxious? If you're noticing any of those things, then that's probably at least the signal saying there's something about the way that you're using your screens that isn't as healthy as it could be. And so that's a good place to start. And then you can start checking in a little bit about, well, what was I doing? Was it the platform that I was on? Was it the amount of time that I was spending on that platform? Was it how I was engaging with that platform? Again, going back to, was I actively engaged and creating content and talking to people, or was I really just listening or just reading what people were saying and just kind of receiving that, but not having a way to kind of deal with and engage with those feelings? And so that's a great place to kind of start. The other piece of it is what things are being sacrificed in your life. So this is a big part of the story in gaming, because people who are really into gaming can spend hours. And if you're a student, is that taking place of you getting your work done, getting your studies done, going to classes, getting on a normal sleep schedule, hanging out with your friends, kind of the normal life stuff that you should be doing as a college student, can be impacted if you're really spending a ton of time doing whatever you're doing on your device. And so that's another place. And then if people are commenting, if you live with other people and they're like, oh, gosh, you're always on, are you going to put that thing down? Are you always on that thing? Oh, so-and-so is never 2 feet away from their phone. I mean, if you're hearing comments and other people are recognizing it, again, it's a signal for you to pay attention to.
What is the research around how media impacts our ability to focus and pay attention? Because I know that those are 2 areas of concern that I hear a lot from students, that they don't feel motivated, that they can't focus, that it's hard to pay attention in long bursts to do their schoolwork. Is there any connection or relationship between how they're consuming media and how their focus and attention is sort of playing out?
Sure. And so there's research that looks at this from a couple of different angles. And so I think this probably what's most relevant to folks who are in college and are kind of just trying to navigate a couple of different things starting off their life. Number one is how you're engaging with it and using more than one device at a time. And so if you are doing something on your computer, you're doing a class or you're studying or you're reading something, and then you've got your Instagram feed pulled up, or you've got your Twitter feed pulled up, and you've got your notifications on. So every time that it goes off, you're going back and forth. There's been some studies that show that shared attention, because we don't multitask. It's kind of been debunked, this idea that we can multitask. We task switch. Some of us are really good at switching from one task to another, but it's disruptive. And so that in itself can cause some difficulties with maintaining attention and focusing. The other bit of research that's really interesting, and again, this has been done in young adults, transitional age, kind of that college age group, is that it seems that folks who engage in excessive amounts of time on their devices are showing signs of inattention compared with people who don't engage as much. And so, is this creating this group of people who look like they have a disorder of their attention and focus because of the way they've engaged with their devices? And I don't think there's great clarity on whether or not it's how we receive the information on the physical device itself, or is it the amount of time, or is it the speed of which the material is coming to us? But there's something there that seems to lead people over time to be less able to focus their attention. And so I think, this is a really newer area of research. I think there's something there. I think there's something there that's going to inform us about how we can engage a little bit more healthy. I think one great thing to do is if you're sitting and doing homework, or you're in class and you're on your laptop, put your phone away. Like, don't try to do both. And again, turn off notifications. You can go for an hour and a half in class and not hear a single thing from the outside world, and you're not going to miss anything. That's really super important. So just minimizing those potential interruptions is really important.
I always say, put it on airplane mode in a drawer in another room, and then do your work, and then think about the amazing reward of all the notifications and messages you're going to have.
I like
when
that.
you're done. It's going to be like Christmas morning in notifications.
And it's so important. People don't realize this, but having your physical device within your arm's reach proximity, there's actually been studies that have shown that people who have their device where they can see it, or they have it present during, in a class, get less information, and they do worse on tests, and they do worse on assignments than those people who didn't have those devices near them. And so it makes a difference.
So let me just reiterate what you said, because I think it's very important. Just the act of having the phone within arm's reach impacted performance.
And I think having it visibly there, because you're already then distracted by the presence, right? And then it's this idea of, am I missing something? Am I getting a notification, or am I seeing a notification? Putting it away and having it out of view makes a difference.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah.
I've never taught in a college classroom where every student didn't have their device at least face down, because most faculty don't want you to have them next to them on the desk.
Yeah. But if it's face down on your desk, what are you doing when it's there? You're thinking about it. Like, at some point in time during your class, you're going to think about, what's so-and-so, what's going on with so-and-so, what's going on my feed? Oh, I need to post something. You're still thinking about it. You're less likely to think about it if you can't see it, and if it's put away.
Wow. Is there any information that's making me wonder about things like Apple Watches that are actually physically on your body?
Oh, they pop up things. There's reminders. All of those things disrupt your thought process in a moment. So if you're supposed to be focusing on something, you're taking an exam, you're listening to a lecture, you're giving a talk, and you have something pop up on whatever device you have, regardless of whether or not it's a big disruption or a disruption that other people know about, it's a blip in your attention, and it's a blip in your focus, and it will make a difference. And often they don't make big differences in ways that we notice, but I have to imagine that repeatedly over time, this is something that's affecting how our brains are wired and how our brains receive information. This is an area of research that people are continuing to look at. We don't quite know what that is, but I have to imagine there's something different about how our brains understand how we need to be focusing on things. If there's an expectation in our brains that we're going to every, minute or so be interrupted by something.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What are some things that we can do to create a healthier relationship with our digital environment and our digital media?
So one of the things that I've really gotten interested in is really the mindset about our digital environments and our digital media. And I think the first thing that pops in my mind is getting away from this notion that our lives are on demand, that we have to constantly be accessing and accessible to what our devices provide. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of turning notifications off, because I really don't think there's that much that you have to know about immediately on demand. when we live in this on-demand type of culture, it creates its own level of anxiety, right? There's this
Mhm.
sense that you always have to be on and responsive, and you don't completely just kind of get to melt and relax. And so number
Mhm.
one is kind of just separating yourself from this idea that you always have to be somewhat consciously aware of what's happening on the other on within your device. And so
Mhm.
turning off notifications, setting times and spaces, especially in your home, where your device is just out of sight and out of mind. So
Mhm.
shutting it off at night. And this is something I used to try to sell to my high school students, but I've kind of given up. So now we just find workarounds. Like, I would love for people to take their phones and put them in a different room when they're sleeping. But it's
Mhm.
not, I've been educated on this over and over. That's not going to happen. I get it. It's not going to happen. But it can, like you were saying, it can be face down. If you use it for an alarm, it can be on a dresser or a desk and not next to you in bed. Because you really should, at bedtime, and usually like 30 minutes to an hour before bedtime, get rid of all of your technology. I mean, if you're going to watch a movie or something or a TV show, that's fine. I'm not cruel. But as far as responding, as far as responding to things like notifications or messages from friends or texts or chats or any of that, it really should be shut down. And even more important, you shouldn't be waking up to respond to those things.
Mhm.
Creating digital free time and spaces are really important. And so if you're sitting down with for a meal, even if you're sitting by yourself for a meal, you don't have to be on Instagram, you don't have to be on Snapchat. You can sit and just have a meal. If you're with other people, great. If not, listen to music. If you really want to watch something on TV, because that's really the only time you get to watch your favorite show because you're busy the rest of the day, watch your favorite show, but maybe don't respond to what's going on your device. And set up, and this is one that I think would be really helpful, but I think it's harder for a lot of people to do. Instead of being on demand for your device and just kind of constantly checking it, set times. Like,
Mhm.
say, I'm gonna get up in the morning, have breakfast, have tea, do whatever you do, take a shower, and then I'm gonna check all of my places before I go to class. And then I'm not going to check my places again till lunch. And then maybe after my last class, I'll check, and then I'll leave it alone. And so it's hard to do, but if you can get your brain wrapped around the fact that you can really be very specific and intentional about when you're going to all of your different spaces that you occupy online, then you can start filling that time with other things and giving your brain a break, because that's what we really need to do, is give our brains some breaks from how we engage in technology.
And I think at the very least, experiment with it, be open-minded to
Yeah,
trying it out and then seeing
yeah,
how you feel. Because I've played with this too. I make people
yeah.
crazy because they're like, you're never on your phone, you don't answer right away, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of like that.
Yes,
The
yes.
bratty part of me is like, maha, I can do it on my own time. Right. Because I don't like, I'm pushing back on being on demand as well, because I feel like
Yeah.
that creates a kind of anxiety in time
Hmm.
management circles. One of the things that we talk
Yes.
about is differentiating between important and urgent. And I think the notification
Hmm.
on demand mixes up what's important versus what is urgent.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
a lot of that stuff is not urgent. And so we create stress by attending to things that we think are urgent but aren't important. And a lot of
Yeah.
times when we look at our time management and we analyze where our gaps are, like where we can improve,
Yeah.
it's that we're giving too much time to things that are urgent but not important.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have covered so much ground.
It's an interesting place to be an adult or a young adult trying to figure out how to have a healthy media life, because I think there's been far more information about kids and development in this area,
Mhm.
and also really problematic behavior like addictions in this area, but less just about how to be healthy. A couple of the places that have some decent information: the American Psychological Association does have some articles on their site that talks about having a healthier life when using media. And then Psychology Today is a platform that has blogs put out by probably hundreds of different mental health wellness experts on a variety of topics, and a lot of them cover digital technology and have some really great pieces on how to have healthy lifestyles and well-being and engagement with digital technology. So those are good places to start to get some basic information.
And we, of course, will link to all of that
Yeah.
information over in the show notes. Is there anything else that we missed or that we want to point out before we sign off?
No, I just want to really point out, and this is something that I use a lot with clients that I work with in my coaching practice, is really when you're using your device, just check into yourself in that moment. How are you physically feeling? How are you mentally feeling? Are you feeling tight? Are you feeling heavy? Are you feeling anxious? Or are you feeling happy and excited about what you're doing? And use that to guide changes that you might need to make. That's a great place to start.
Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.